Good morning from the great state of Missouri. Welcome into the pregame call presented by the Call and Gentry Law Group. We are going to take you up to kickoff of Mizzou and Boston College. That is coming your way at 11 a.m. our time. That would be noon local time in the great state of Massachusetts. We will get into the huge controversy that Eli Drinkwitz has stirred up. The Boston College offense with a backup quarterback trying to continue Missouri's defensive misery this year, and Tyler Beatty looking to continue to carry the Mizzou offense to a 3-1 record. We'll talk about all that and take your questions, all that coming up here in just a few minutes, but want to let you know off the top that this show is brought to you by the Call and Gentry Law Group in Jefferson City. You can find them online at callgentry.com. You can get in touch with them at 573-691-4571. They do almost everything: personal injury, wrongful death, family law, criminal law, business law, government relations and contracts. Maybe you signed a contract to play a football game in Boston, Massachusetts, that you'd rather be playing a football game in Champaign, Illinois, and you want to get out of that contract. Call Gentry probably could have handled that for you. Probably a little bit late now, but could have at one point. Litigation work, appellate work, workers' comp. They'll do just about anything for you. The guys at Call Gentry, sorry, guys and ladies, shout out to Emily down there, have done plenty of stuff for me over the years and certainly have always handled it very well. So if you guys have legal issues, you want to get in touch with the folks at Call and Gentry down in Jefferson City. Now on to the game and our first comment from EB this morning. So good morning to you as well, EB. Appreciate you joining us. And if you're there in the comments, feel free. We're going to hit on your guys' comments, questions a little bit later. We'll talk to Andy Backstrom from EagleAction.com. He covers Boston College a little under an hour. We'll check in with Mitchell Forty at Alumni Stadium in Chestnut Hill. He did make the trip for this one for us. So all kinds of stuff for you guys throughout the next, hour to hour and a half. Kickoff about 87 minutes away. We'll get you up close to it. If you're here with us, appreciate that. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you do subscribe to the channel, what that's going to let you do is set alerts for when we go live. That's going to come in especially handy somewhere around 2:30 this afternoon when we come back with the post-game show, either to celebrate a team coming back for the SEC home opener at 3-1, or to commiserate about a team that has had 2 swing games in the first 4 weeks of the season and has lost both of them. This one, honestly, I don't really have any idea what to expect. I was a little bit surprised. Missouri is a 1.5-point favorite, at least last I checked in this one. I thought that would probably just kind of go the other way. I thought that would be BC by about a point and a half. And I think, actually, if Phil Yurkovich was Boston College's starting quarterback in this one, I think it might be BC by 4 or 5, to be quite honest. But because Yurkovich is out, that means that Dennis Grosel is the starting quarterback for Boston College. He went 5 of 13 for 34 yards in the game against Temple. He didn't have to be any better than that. Temple is no threat this year. BC won that game 28-3. But I think that's the main reason that Missouri is actually a road favorite in this game. Again, I'm a little bit surprised about it, but there's really only one difference between these two teams. They've both played 3 games. Missouri has had one test. Now, they didn't pass that test. They lost 35-28 at Kentucky, but they have at least had a test. Boston College has had no tests. They have outscored the opposition. I believe it's 124-31. That is against Colgate, a team they beat 51-0. Against UMass, an FBS team in name only. They are awful. They're probably better than SEMO, but not significantly, and BC won that 45-28. And then again, Temple last week, they beat 28-3, and Temple got beat 61-14 by Rutgers. Temple is also, again, just not what they have been at times in the past. So Missouri, at least we found out a little bit about them in the Kentucky game. We found out probably they're not quite ready to win a game against a team of that caliber, but they were in it. They've been tested. They know what it's like to play in a game like this. They know what it's like to play in a road atmosphere that, frankly, should be a lot more intimidating than this one. Boston College's stadium, I believe, holds around 45,000, maybe just a little bit under. They're expecting that to be close to a sellout, but from everything I've heard from people all offseason and then just looking at social media last night, I would bet 10% of that crowd is going to be Missouri fans, at least. A lot of Mizzou fans made this trip, made this the one that they put on their schedule before the year. It's a big city, Yankees, Red Sox Friday night. A lot of things to like about making this trip, unless apparently you are Eli Drinkwitz. And now, look, I'm joking about this. I want to be clear. This idea that what Eli Drinkwitz said earlier this week is some sort of controversy is maybe the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I guess Drinkwitz said, and full disclosure, I was out of town this week, so I was not at the press conference, but obviously I've read about it and seen the comments. Drinkwitz said basically that, no offense to Boston College, but he would prefer in the future when they're scheduling, if this was a regional game, a game that's more of a natural rival and maybe, like something that helps you in an area you recruit. And he said, I believe, when was the last time Missouri signed a player from the great state of Massachusetts or something along those lines. I mean, he's just right, guys. That's not an insult. Now, look, I like this game because it's different, right? It's not one we see a lot, to be quite honest. And like Michael Kaiser points out, it's interesting that this is the first ever meeting between these two teams. That's what I like about college football, and that's what I want to see more of. Teams that you don't play regularly. Honestly, it's really the only reason to watch most bowl games. You get a game against a North Carolina a few years ago, or back when Missouri was in the Big 12, a game against Arkansas that maybe you don't see a lot. That appeals to me. It also appeals, hey, the only road games I really get interested in now are the ones that are somewhere I haven't been. So I've been to Boston, but not for a football game. I've never been to BC, so make that trip. A lot of people would ask before the season, if I'm only going to one road game, which one should I go to? And I said, you go to BC because you're going to get a chance to go to Georgia again, to South Carolina again. You can go to Kentucky next year, Tennessee next year. But this might be the only chance you have to go to BC. Missouri's been playing football for 130 years, and this is the first time it's happened. So I like it. I understand what Drinkwitz is saying, though, and it doesn't need to be some big controversy. This isn't exactly a national spotlight game, obviously. Some people, the diehards of college football, are going to pay attention and watch it for a little bit at 11 a.m. on ESPN2. But it's obviously not this big showcase game that's on national television, but it's two kind of middle-of-the-road power conference programs looking to take a step, and I like the intrigue of it. I do understand why Drinkwitz said what he said. I also don't understand why it became a thing this week. I can't imagine. I mean, if you're Boston College and you are searching for things to be upset about and get your team motivated and this and that, okay, that's fine. Hey, he doesn't want to play us. He doesn't like us. Whatever. I mean, it's not really true, but that's fine. But other than that, I just don't see the controversy here. I'm not sure what the issue is. Hey, Boston College is a good program. It's going to be a tough game. In the future, when I'm more in charge of scheduling, we might schedule this against an Iowa or a Colorado or an Oklahoma State or something like that, There's nothing wrong with saying that at all. We complain, media, and not as much fans, but mostly media, we complain over and over, these guys say nothing. Then the second they say anything that we can turn into a controversy, we excoriate them for saying it. I mean, it's stupid, and it is largely the media's fault. I guess I didn't watch game day this morning because I was watching the Ryder Cup, but I guess they mentioned it on ESPN and on College Game Day, and it's just stupid. We're making a thing out of something that's not a thing. So I want to get into what you guys are thinking about this game. Justin Ferguson up, saying got a feeling that the offense will have a big day. Justin hopes so. That means big Jaeger shots. If you've been around our pregame show before, you know Justin's game day routine. So if Missouri scores a lot, then, hey, he's going to have a long day. On the opposite side of things, Adam says maybe it's the Mizzou fan in me, but I'm not optimistic about this game. And look, again, this can go – nothing in this game would surprise me. Missouri getting a few things figured out on defense, having the offense continue to roll and winning by 17 points is not going to stun me. Missouri figuring out nothing on defense, offense sputtering a little bit, and they lose by 17 points, that's also not really going to stun me. I don't know what to think of this game, guys. I am picking this game based on really nothing to do with this game. I just said before the season, I looked at the first third of the season, and Central Michigan and SEMO were, games that you have to win. And then you had Kentucky and Boston College, which were really, to me, kind of the two biggest games of the year, the two big swing games. And they were both in the first 4 weeks. They were both on the road. And so I just decided early on, I don't think Missouri's good enough to win both of those games, but I think they'll be good enough to not lose both of them. And so had Missouri won at Kentucky 2 weeks ago, I would probably be picking Boston College to win this game. Missouri lost at Kentucky 2 weeks ago, so I'm picking them to win this game. Does that make any sense? Probably not, but look, I'm not a professional handicapper. There's no rhyme or reason to why I pick the games I pick. I go into this thinking Missouri finds a way to get enough done. Again, if Phil Jurkovec was out or was in the game, then maybe I look at that differently, but obviously he isn't. And, I think that swings things in Missouri's favor, even though Dennis Grosel is not like this raw rookie making his first or second start. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes with Andy Backstrom. But I want to give you guys a look at some of the numbers. And we are not yet to the point in this season where these numbers really mean a whole lot. Because, again, Missouri has SEMO on that ledger. Boston College has Colgate and UMass and Temple on that ledger. So you don't want to put in a whole lot of stock. I mean, Missouri averaging 514 yards in total offense. Yeah, that's great. They had like 480 in the first half against SEMO last week, so that pumps up that number. Last week, I think Missouri was at like 411 a game. They really, they had well over 600 yards of total offense, I think, against SEMO last week, so that really skews the numbers when you've only got 3 games to go on. One thing Missouri has done very well is hold on to the ball. They've got 1 turnover in 3 games. BC averaging a turnover in every game. And, the more I look at this, again, you don't put a lot of stats in or a lot of stock in the stats this early on, but BC is only averaging 411 yards of offense. And again, they have played probably their 3 easiest football games of the year. It's going to get tougher with Mizzou and then with the ACC schedule. The ACC is not great, but pretty much every team in the ACC I feel confident saying is better than UMass, Colgate, and probably Temple. So BC has played the easiest quarter of its schedule, and they're only averaging 411 yards of total offense, which honestly these days in college football is not all that much. The key really in any Missouri game right now, the way things have gone, is going to be the run defense, right? And so that's a big number there. And BC has run it well, over 200 yards a game. Again, the competition, nothing special. Missouri has been dreadful. It's the worst Power 5 run defense in the country. Gave up, 290, I think, or 294 to SEMO last week. Even though a lot of that was in the fourth quarter, it still counts. So BC comes at this thing with, they don't have a lead back, really. Pat Garwo III is their leading rusher, and he's averaging about 79 yards a game, 237 yards on 36 attempts through 3 games. But Garwo, then senior Alex Sinkfield, and senior Travis Levy, they're all averaging between 6 and 12 carries a game. They've combined for 6 touchdowns in 3 games. They're all, Levy is, I guess, the least productive. He's got 6 carries for about 28 yards a game. But he scored 3 touchdowns. So he's more of the short yardage guy, the goal line guy. Sinkfield's carried 25 times for 100 yards in 3 games, averaging just 4 a carry. So he's the least productive per carry. And then Pat Garwo, 36 carries, 237 yards, 6.5 a carry, 2 touchdowns. So he's the lead guy, but they don't have one guy with, it's not a Tyler Beatty distribution. Garwo has 36 of the 80 carries. So what is that? If I can do quick math, which I likely can't, that's like 45% of the carries. It's not even half of the running responsibility goes to one guy. But Garwo is the lead guy. But they have 3 guys who can run it. And Missouri has shown 0 ability to stop anyone running it. So that's obviously the big matchup there. So before we get to our discussion with Andy Backstrom, I want to kind of run through your all's comments and see how it goes. Tyler Wynn with the Good Will Hunting reference was an excellent line in Good Will Hunting. I feel like it might not be as good of a line on the internet, but hey, whatever, man. Talk any kind of trash you want to after the game. Floyd the Barber says Mizzou's been getting pushed around up front, look too light. Do you think there's a problem with our strength and conditioning program? Okay, so this is, and I'm going to take that comment down just because it's taking up a lot of room on the screen, but this is something that I feel like happens every year. When a team starts to struggle, especially if it's early in a regime, the very first thing is either they look too slow, or they don't look big enough, or they look too big, or it goes back to is our strength staff doing something wrong? Look, the strength staff is important. I'm not trying to minimize them, but I think we also get way too caught up every offseason in the strength and conditioning programs impact. I mean, look, guys, they're all good at their jobs. They all know how to condition guys to play D1 football. I don't think it has a lot to do with a certain unit's not in good enough shape, or not strong enough, or too big, or not big enough. I think it just has more to do with they haven't been very good. They need better players, and they need more of them. I think when they get guys who are better football players, the strength and conditioning staff will look better, and the defensive coordinator will look better. And a lot of things. I think Missouri's problem right now on defense on the front 6 is they just don't have enough guys that are all that good at football, to be quite honest with you, or good enough. To say they're not all that good is clearly wrong. They're Division I football players, but good enough to win games, like today's in the SEC. They need more of those guys. Cam wants to know what the purpose is of a Caleb Evans still not being listed as a starter. The depth chart means nothing. Eli Drinkwitz gives us a depth chart every week because he's kind of supposed to. It's not going to change all year. It's the same as it's been. I mean, there are plenty of examples. There are guys literally listed on the depth chart who haven't played. I think Drake Heismeyer got 3 snaps last week, and he's listed as a second teamer. That's not realistic. So the depth chart just it's I don't even know what it is. It's a formality. It's fodder, but it means nothing. Caleb Evans is a starter, regardless of what the depth chart says. Regardless of if he plays the first snap of the game, he's a starter. There is no question. And like Adam says, yeah, he doesn't even. Drinkwitz has nothing to do with the depth chart. It's the sports information department who will get a depth chart from Drinkwitz and then post it. And my guess is the way that conversation goes is, hey, coach, any changes to the depth chart? Nah, whatever we did last week, just put that out again. And it's gonna remain that way really all year long. Adam says, Drink just said in an interview, Mizzou has to be more aggressive in stopping the run, which will put the corners on an island. Think we expected it, but we'll probably see more blitzing today. Yeah, whether it's blitzing or just stacking guys in the box, I agree you're going to see more of it. And again, then it will really come down to does BC have the guys to make Missouri pay for that? Again, Dennis Grossell, we're not sure what to think. Zay Flowers is really the guy to watch for BC. 10 catches, 213 yards, and a touchdown through 3 games. Tight end Trey Berry, 6 for 150, and he could cause a problem because I'm not sure that I trust Missouri's. I guess he'll probably be more covered by a safety, but, that's a tough matchup. And then C.J. Lewis is the third receiver, 6 catches for 101 yards. But it's really Zay Flowers. And he's only averaging 3.5 catches a game, but he's also averaging 21.3 yards per catch. So it becomes a question of, okay, you're going to have to commit more guys to stopping the run, which, by the way, they did against Kentucky. They had a safety in the box on a ton of plays in that game, and it didn't work. But by committing more guys to the run, obviously you are opening yourself up to one-on-one matchups, like the comment said, in the secondary. So can you cover their guys one-on-one? I think they largely could against Central Michigan. Against Kentucky, Wan'Dale Robinson got loose a few times, and that's where you risk getting burned. Do you want to die a slow death, giving up 5 yards a carry, or do you want to put yourself at risk of dying a very quick death with something that gets you beat over the top? And that's going to be Steve Wilkes and Eli Drinkwitz's discussion and challenge today. And obviously, hey, if you've got Ennis Rakestraw out there, if you've got Ishburdine and Caleb Evans and guys that are getting the job done one-on-one, then you're in good shape. If you start getting beat over the top, you got to go back to more zone, you got to pull guys out of the box, and then they beat you with the run. So that's the basic, I guess, battle of offensive and defensive football. So as far as a little more about the specific matchups in this game, look, I know some about BC. I've done some research, but we always like to give you guys the kind of view from somebody who knows a lot more. So we're going to do that. Got about a 20-minute interview here from the BC side of things. It is from our earlier opposition research show earlier in the week. So going to play that for you guys. Then we'll be back and talk a little bit more about the matchup. He covers Boston College for the Rivals.com network. Andy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Gabe. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you spending some time with us. So a lot of these shows and a lot of these games, it's like, okay, we have some frame of reference. Last year, these two teams played, or they have played before. Mizzou and Boston College, no such thing. Kind of fun, I think, always to get a new series and a new opponent on the schedule.
Absolutely. BC typically doesn't play an SEC opponent. This is the first time since 1987 that an SEC team will come into Alumni Stadium. The last time BC played an SEC team was 2008 in the Music City Bowl. They lost to Vanderbilt that year. So yeah, it's a different experience for Boston College. It's a different kind of matchup, but a new series and a good one at that.
So let's start with, what do we know about Boston College? I mean, they've outscored teams like 124-31, and the closest thing I think they've played to like a real opponent is Temple, which I'm not sure what we think of Temple because they got run by Rutgers in week 1.
Yeah, Temple's not the same Temple we saw in the mid to late 2000s, but Temple, has a good pedigree, and beating any team 28-3, especially a higher regarded team in the FBS, is still a statement. But as you mentioned, BC really hasn't played anyone real. This week is a litmus test for Boston College against Missouri. This is the first real test. People have been waiting to see if BC can go into Clemson the next week 4-0. But first you have to beat Missouri, which is a very real team, an SEC opponent that's already played legitimate opponents, already had a game against Kentucky. That was a test for Missouri itself. So I think this is a game people have had circled. It's at home. Again, an SEC opponent and a real test for where this BC team actually is.
So the big story, obviously, with BC is that Phil Jurkovec, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that exactly correctly, but goes out a week ago, out for the season. BC throws for 34 yards in his absence. So where's the passing game at? And I mean, I'm sure there's some nerves and stuff like that game 1, but what are realistic expectations for that aspect going forward?
That was a huge blow to BC. Phil Jurkovec's a guy that people have first to third round NFL grades for him. He's someone that will come back next year because of this injury, but if he played well enough this year, he probably would have left for the NFL draft. But that being said, I really think that Dennis Grosel yesterday didn't really show. Again, as you mentioned, 34 passing yards. That was more of a byproduct of the game plan. Temple is not good at stopping the run. BC has been really just not trying to show opponents anything on tape. They've been very vanilla. They've been trying to run the ball. And I think that was more of, we can beat Temple without throwing it, and we don't want to give Missouri or Clemson or anyone else a look at what this passing offense is going to be without Dracovic. Grosel is a step down from Phil Dracovic, but he is one of the most proven backups there is in college football. He started 8 games, well, now 9 after Temple. He had a record-setting performance against UVA last year where he came in and threw for 520 yards, tying Doug Flutie's single-game program record. He's got a big arm. That's not the problem. He makes a lot of the right reads. He's not as accurate maybe as Dracovic is, but he's a better runner, and he's a gamer. He's a really good leader, and he's definitely someone who, it's not like you're just sliding in a true freshman or someone who hasn't played before. Dennis Grosel knows what he's doing. The question will be, will BC's defense be playing well enough to keep them in games? Because I don't think Grosel is going to win them games themselves.
When he is throwing the ball, is it I mean, do they have one or two guys that are, kind of the guys you got to identify first, or, what do his targets look like?
Zay Flowers is the name to know. He's a guy that probably will leave after this season. It depends on what his targets look like. I mean, it was guaranteed probably that he would leave when Dracovic was still throwing the ball. We'll have to see what the offense looks like again with Grosel back there. But CBS just did a mock draft where they had him going 22nd overall to the Arizona Cardinals for next year. BC's never had a first-round wide receiver, so this is rare. This guy is something else. Reminds me a lot of a Stephon Diggs. He's a little bit smaller, but he is, he plays big. He's a vertical threat. He can blow the top off the defense. He's also a horizontal threat. They use him in the jet sweep. They use him on bubble screens. They swing him outside. They motion him a lot, pre-snap motion. This offense is a lot of layered passing routes and pre-snap motion. Otherwise, look at CJ Lewis as a big third down target. Kobe White is a guy who came back from an ACL injury but led this team in receiving yards from 2017 to 2019. And Jaden Williams is a true freshman who has 2 touchdowns this year, and a lot of people think he could be the next Zay Flowers. So there are a ton of wide receivers here, which is not typical for Boston College. But, yeah, they do have the weapons.
All right, so we've spent a lot of time talking about the BC passing game, and anybody who's watched Missouri play and is watching this show is thinking, you're kind of whistling past the graveyard here, because I'm not sure anybody needs to actually throw the football against Missouri. They gave up close to 300 yards rushing against Kentucky. They gave up close to 300 yards rushing against Southeast Missouri State, even though, 180 of that was in the fourth quarter against like third-string defenders. The numbers are ugly. So I know BC is averaging a couple hundred yards rushing a game. Is that, is this a sense where BC's offensive strength will match up with Missouri's defensive weakness? Is that what they want to do first?
That's definitely going to be their game plan because, again, I really think that this offense changes. They say it doesn't, but I think from last week against Temple, I think you can tell that they want to run the football, and they have wanted to run the football. Last year it was out of whack. They did not want to be that imbalanced with the passing over the running. And I think you'll see them try to run the ball again. Now, the question is, they switched over from a man-to-man blocking scheme to a zone blocking scheme for when Jeff Hafley took over and Frank Cignetti Jr. is the offensive coordinator. And that caused some growing pains last year. Now, again, like every other team with COVID, there was not much of a spring ball and limited training camp, and they rearranged the offensive line. So that might have contributed. But this year, there's been times where the running game's really worked, especially against UMass, but it works for most people against UMass.
Right.
And times where it hasn't worked as much. So I think that will be, really a telltale game if BC can get it going against Missouri, even if they have struggled against the run. It's a part of the offense that they're still trying to find a true identity. There's not one running back that is the bell cow. Pat Garwell was the guy who got the start yesterday, but they've had 3 different running backs start in the 3 weeks they've had. So you'll see more of a committee approach. They've got 4 guys they really like to use, but they do want balance. That's something they really do want.
So you mentioned earlier the key is going to be, can BC's defense keep them in games? I mean, What are the strengths and relative weaknesses there? What has given again through the schedule they've played? It might be a little tough to tell, but UMass put up 28 points. Where's the vulnerability there? Do you think?
Yeah, the UMass game is really interesting. When you look at BC, they've held opponents scoreless 9 of 12 quarters this year. So that's a pretty good feat. But again, the schedule's been a cakewalk. When you look at the UMass game, it all unraveled in the third quarter. They have 21 points. Now, 7 of those were after a muff punt, goal line score. But that was a game in which the secondary really let down. And that's what people look at BC. They really want to see an improvement of those defensive backs. Jeff Hafley was a defensive back guru when he was with Ohio State. And then he did the same thing when he coached for 7 years as an NFL assistant. So that's what people want to see. And last week against Temple, there was that improvement. The secondary played great. They never broke. Sometimes they bend, but they didn't break. And something that was really a big improvement was the linebackers. That was a unit that got hit hard in the offseason. BC lost his 2 leading tacklers, Isaiah McDuffie, who's with the Packers now, and Max Richardson, who's on the Raiders practice squad. So that was a unit that really got hit hard in terms of graduation and leaving for the NFL. They played well last week. The defensive line is another group that's pretty vulnerable. They were really, really hit hard with departures and injuries. Chibuzi Onwuka was a transfer from Buffalo they had last year. He tore his Achilles in preseason. He's out for the year. Luke Beckett was a guy who they had last year over from Cal, but now he's back at Cal because the Pac-12 is playing this year. He came over to BC because he thought they wouldn't be playing last year. And then Marcus Valdez is BC's best pass rusher. He's been out all year with a hand injury. So they've really had to rely on true freshmen, which is probably going to result in some of those guys using their freshman year instead of redshirting. But yeah, it's been really a rotational. It's almost like hockey line shifts. A lot of guys coming in and out of that defensive line. Sometimes they play with 3 defensive ends and 1 defensive tackle or nose tackle. So that's a pretty interesting approach. So we'll see how that goes as the season progresses.
I know you mentioned Jeff Hafley came over from Ohio State, and I'm just curious, Ohio State really became kind of that one program that was in the Big Ten that started to look more like an SEC team, right? They went with the speed and athleticism, and they stood out from that league a little bit. Is that kind of Hafley's approach, and where's he at in the process of, kind of upgrading overall team speed, athleticism, things like that to where he wants it?
Yeah, that's where he does want it. It's hard to make that transformation when you go from a team like Ohio State and then you go to BC. Right. And you need time to get your recruits in the building. Hafley's someone who really likes to build through the high school process. He doesn't like pulling a lot of transfers in, even though he's had success with that, obviously. But he wants to build from within, and that takes time. But you're seeing it a little bit more this year. Again, a lot of it's still been vanilla because they've been playing opponents they're blowing out. Mm-hmm. But they do like to play in a 4-2-5. They like to have their nickel packages most of the game where you've got 5 defensive backs. They use that nickel back kind of as sometimes they put him in the box, sometimes they blitz him, sometimes he acts just as a regular corner. They'll often throw in an extra safety for dime. He likes to get creative in that way. They really like to use a lot of their defensive backs on the field at the same time. It's usually 2 linebackers on the field. So yes, speed. They converted over one of their safeties to linebacker this offseason. It's a lot about getting hats on the ball, getting to the ball quickly, and forcing turnovers.
Yeah, so big picture, I mean, you mentioned it's Clemson next week, and whatever might happen there, that's definitely the best team BC plays. I mean, I'm looking at their schedule, and like every game I'm going, that one could go either way. That one could go either way. It's the only other ranked team they have is Virginia Tech, who just got beat. There's Wake Forest, Florida State, Louisville, NC State, a bunch of teams that are kind of down right now. So what's a good season for BC, and B, like, how important is this Missouri game in terms of getting to that point?
This game is huge. People have had this circled on the calendar even before Phil Dracovic went out. This was a game in which people thought, okay, if BC wins this, they go into Death Valley 4-0. They'll probably be ranked for the first time since 2018, second time in the decade. That's big alone for a program, for recruiting, for the progress of Jeff Hafley. So this game is big, especially considering it's at home against an SEC opponent. That being said, yeah, what's a good season? I mean, before this year started with Djokovic in, people thought this conference was pretty wide open. It certainly seems that way now when you see Clemson almost losing to Georgia Tech, and you see, Miami getting crushed, and it's just it's a weird year, but it has been a weird couple of years in the ACC, and I think BC, a successful season would be anything more than 7 wins. They haven't had an 8-win season since 2009, and I think people want more than that, but I think you have to start there. So if they win 8 games with a backup quarterback starting for most of the year, I think that's considered a success for BC.
So you mentioned the fans have had this one circled for a while. I mean, I'm not going to profess to watching a ton of Boston college football over the last few years. What's the home field advantage like? What do you think the atmosphere is going to be like for this game? I mean, are they drawn well under Hafley, or is that kind of a building process?
It's really tough to judge because they've had one home game this year, and it was a pretty good, they had 28,000 people there against Colgate, an FCS team. But last year, of course, no one was allowed to go. They didn't have any fans in the stadium because of COVID. And it's really hard to judge. I expect a good turnout this week. It's Parents' Weekend. There will be parents there. Students will be there. Students showed out well in week 1. I think that you'll see, I think there'll be a good turnout. I've heard a lot of Missouri people are traveling, and I know that there's a strong contingent there in Boston for whatever reason. I think SEC people are everywhere, so That's not too surprising to me. But I think it'll be a pretty good showing. I mean, the stadium fits 44,500 people. Anytime you have a big program like a Clemson or a Notre Dame come, it fills up. So, I would expect at least 38,000 people there. Should be a good show.
So you mentioned, I mean, this is the game that a lot of Missouri fans said this is the road game I'm going to this year because, they don't get that chance. I mean, they can go to Knoxville or Columbia, South Carolina anytime they want. This may be the only time Missouri plays up in BC. So obviously, look, there's Boston. I'm not going to ask you what to do in Boston, but around campus on game day, what or maybe after the game, what kind of things are there? All right, cutting that a little short for you guys because, hey, if you're watching this, you're probably not up in Chestnut Hill wanting to know the pregame locations. But appreciate Andy Backstrom talking Mizzou BC with us and want to get to some more of your thoughts and comments and all that. Before I do, want to remind you, the pregame show every single week brought to you by Call & Gentry Law Group in Jefferson City. Check them out at callgentry.com. On the internet, you can a lot of times during the week, they'll have a live, online chat you can do. You can also call them at 573-691-4571 and schedule a consultation with them. Personal injury, business law, family law, anything you need, Chip, Jason, Emily, Nick, everybody down there will take care of you. So if you've got anything you need, as with all our sponsors, we just ask you, hey, you don't necessarily have to use them, but give them the first shot. Give them a call and see what the people at Call & Gentry Law Group can get done for you. So, again, want to get back to some of your all's comments. We're going to check in with Mitchell Forty from the stadium here in 15, 20 minutes, look around the SEC. But Robert Connolly is asking about Jay Macklin. I mean, he was listed on the injury report as out this week. And, look, this isn't meant as a shot to Jay Macklin, but even if he comes back, he's not going to play a lot. I mean, you look at the receiver rotation, Chisholm, Dove, Cooper, Lovett, J.J. Hester made some plays last week. Chance Loopers made some plays. Barrett Bannister's going to get some snaps. I mean, there's just not a lot of snaps there. Jay Macklin's looking at, being the 8th or 9th receiver on this team this year. Now, that could certainly change next year. But he's hurt right now. At some point, he should be healthy. But even once he's healthy, outside of the North Texas game, something like that, I just don't see major snaps there, to be quite honest. Stewart wants to know who actually scheduled the game, and was it just to have a Power 5 non-con game? And, yeah, I don't know if it was Jim Sturk or Mack Rhodes. I don't remember. But here's the thing. I mean, you've got to play a Power 5 team. And you got to understand, if you're – I mean, it takes two to schedule a game, right? Missouri can't just call and say, hey, let's play, and the other team has to say yes. And if you're another Power 5 team and Missouri's calling you, you're going, do we want to do a home-and-home with Missouri? Because Missouri's a team that like, we're not going to get a lot of national bounce for beating them, but they are good enough to beat us. You know, I talk about those games all the time that you don't want to schedule where if you schedule a non-conference game, you either want to be pretty confident you're going to win, or you're going to be pretty confident that, hey, if we play them, even if we lose, we're going to get a lot of credit for playing them. And Missouri doesn't really fall into that category for other Power 5 football teams. I mean, if they're calling Missouri, they're, you know, yes, if you're Alabama, well, bad example because that's in Missouri's conference, but if you're Ohio State, you'd feel pretty confident you're beating Missouri probably. But let's say you're Oklahoma State. Let's say you're, you know, Washington or Arizona. You're looking at it and going, hey, Missouri's good enough to beat us on the right day, and maybe on a lot of days. But also, if we beat Missouri, nobody nationally is going to say, oh, that's a really good win going and beating Missouri at home or in Columbia. You know, it just, there's not a lot of payoff. So it takes two to schedule a game, and a lot of these teams have other games already scheduled. You know, if you look at a team like Clemson, Iowa State, these Georgia Tech, these teams already have their one Power 5 non-conference game in a rivalry game that's scheduled every year. So if they're playing another Power 5 team in the non-conference, they're making their schedule a lot more difficult. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. But again, I like this game. Maybe I'm the minority, but this game is much more interesting to me than most other non-conference games Missouri has played lately, to be quite honest. Floyd asking about Mekhi Wingo, and do encourage you guys to read Joel Lorenzi's story on Wingo on our site this morning. He's been kind of a pleasant surprise. He's tied with Akil Byers for the most snaps among defensive tackles this year. I think he's taken either 99 or 100 snaps. I don't remember the exact number, but he's been a surprise to me. Now, that said, look, the run defense has been bad, so let's not make Mekhi Wingo into a great player just yet. Now, he's a true freshman. He gets some slack, and he's a guy that you see a lot of potential for in the future. Not saying he's the problem with this defense, right? No, much bigger issue is Kobe Whiteside, Darius Robinson, who's out today, and even Akil Byers, like, not getting the job done. You don't count on the true freshman to be the guy getting the job done. He's played well. Whose game would you compare him to? I honestly, I've got a real tough time defensive tackle-wise. I mean, he's not Sheldon. He's not Ndamukong Suh. He's not Aaron Donald, you know. But it's just not a position that you isolate on and watch a lot during a game. And also, I've seen basically 2 games in his career. So I really don't feel qualified to give you a comp quite yet. Demetrius asking how you feel about Martez Manuels to start the season. I was expecting a big step up from him and haven't seen it yet. Yeah, I agree. He hasn't been noticeably bad, but he also hasn't been noticeably good. He's just kind of been there. And I think Missouri needs more out of him. Now, again, the front 6 is a much bigger problem than the back 5, but Manuel plays that position where he's got to be a factor in the run defense too. He's got to come up a little bit and make some hits and play almost a linebacker spot in certain situations. So, yeah, I would say, I don't know if disappointing is fair, but certainly not difference-making from Manuel so far. Spencer says that Wilkes is going to have to bite the bullet and load the box and trust the secondary to win one-on-one against bad QBs, and more specifically against bad receivers. And I don't know that Boston College has bad receivers. That's not fair to say yet. Again, Zay Flowers is pretty well thought of, and he's a probable NFL guy. Outside of that, I'm not real sure what they have, but yeah, that's something that basically I think at this point Steve Wilkes is at the point where he's got to say, okay, we're going to put 7 guys in the box, and we might even put 8 guys in the box, and we're going to dare you to throw the football. And if you beat us that way, then you just beat us that way. I mean, that's kind of what you're going to have to do. Did Andy say if BC beats Mizzou that BC will be ranked? I think he said it's possible. I don't know if he said they would be, but at 4-0, they've got a shot, no question. What are you most surprised by on the offensive side of the football? Cameron says. I don't know that anything surprised me. Beatty has obviously been, used more and has been better than I expected he would. But I don't, Connor Bazelak has taken a little bit of a step, not a huge step yet, but he looks better than he did last year. The wide receivers have been okay, not great. The tight ends have made a nice contribution. Offensive line maybe has been a little bit better than I expected, and that kind of leads to a matchup that we really haven't talked about yet that could certainly and probably will determine this game, and that's Boston College's offensive line against Missouri's defensive line. BC has 3 guys on the offensive line. I was texting with a friend of mine who does a lot of NFL draft and scouting type stuff, and he said they've got 3 linemen that are potential NFL players on BC. So, look, given what Missouri's defensive line has obviously been, that could be an issue. If Boston College can just line up and maul Missouri up front and average 5 yards a carry, Missouri probably not winning this game. It'll look a lot like the Kentucky game did. Cam finished that. I thought we were going to see a lot more of a shared backfield than we are. And I agree. Like I said, that was one of the things that has surprised me. And I think that's as much. I think it's a 50-50 split. Tyler Beatty's been really good and has played like a guy that you don't ever want to take off the field. Elijah Young has probably not shown them as much as they hoped he would early in the season. So, I think it's a combination of those two things. Carly says Martez is going off today, and Stewart says him and Jalen Carlisle. That's possible. That would certainly be a good thing. Again, I think the front 7 or the front 6 determines this matchup more than the back 5 does, but certainly for Missouri, that would be encouraging if those two guys had big games. We're going to get back to this matchup here shortly. We're going to have Mitch Forty call in here in about 10 minutes probably. But want to spend a little bit of time looking around the SEC, and this is the week that bye weeks start. You see Ole Miss isn't playing today. But Georgia Vandy at 11 o'clock, that's a 5-touchdown spread, and it seems a little bit low. It's a terrible game. LSU Mississippi State is somewhat of an intriguing game. It's a rematch of the opener last year where KJ Costello threw for like 560 yards, and everybody said, oh, my God, Mike Leach is going to take the SEC by storm. And as it turned out, all it was that LSU was really bad and couldn't stop the pass. Game of the day in the league probably is A&M Arkansas. That's at 2:30 on CBS. Right after, basically after Missourians, you can probably flip over to A&M and Arkansas. A&M's like a 4.5-point favorite. Arkansas getting a lot of love. I love A&M in this game, guys. I just don't think Arkansas is quite ready for this. I could be wrong. Auburn hosts Georgia State in a game nobody should watch. Tennessee, Florida. It's not what Tennessee, Florida used to be, because Tennessee anybody's not what Tennessee anybody used to be. Florida's favored by like close to 3 touchdowns. Kentucky, South Carolina, I don't think there's a lot of intrigue there. Surprised Kentucky's only a 5 or a 6-point favorite, but that's the night game. I guess Tennessee, Florida's probably the best night game, although Kentucky, South Carolina might be the most competitive because Southern Miss, Alabama is hideous. It's like a 45-point line in a game that shouldn't be played. So there's your SEC slate. As I said, you don't see Ole Miss on that. Let's see. I'm counting real quick. Yeah, so I think Ole Miss is the only team that's off this week because obviously I didn't put Missouri and BC on that scoreboard because you guys all know about that game. But next week, really, we'll get into a few more league games. I mean, there's, 4 of them, right? Five SEC games there on the slate today, and you'll have about that number every week, I think, going forward. Justin says, hang on, I put 2 things on the screen at once. Justin says need A&M to win against Arkansas if they have 2 or more losses before coming to Mizzou. Then it could kill a potentially big matchup. Yeah, that's true. You would like to see A&M win this week. They play Alabama next week. I don't think they're winning next week. So, if they drop that one and they come in 3-2, there's not going to be, or 4-2, I guess it might be. There's not going to be the buzz that there potentially could be if A&M's coming in more at like 5-1. But really more than that, Missouri, I think, has to take care of its business the next 2 weeks against BC and Tennessee to make that a big game. Because if Missouri's 5-1 going into that game and A&M's, in that neighborhood, then, hey, you've got a potential game between maybe ranked teams. If Missouri wins the next 3, at BC, home against Tennessee, then takes care of business against North Texas, I think at 5-1 they'd have a chance to be kind of in that bottom 6-7 teams of the top 25. So, yeah, you'd like to see A&M probably win that game, I think, but we shall see. Justin also says South Carolina looking better and could pull the upset against Kentucky tonight. I would be awfully surprised, to be quite honest. Cam says that Mitchell Forty is reporting that Case Cook did not make the trip from Missouri. That's interesting. He was listed as questionable. Drinkwitz said last week that he could have played. He and Ennis Rakestraw could have played against SEMO if there was a game. So that means one of two things. It means either Eli Drinkwitz was lying, and look, coaches lie a lot about injuries. It would not shock me if Eli Drinkwitz just flat was not telling the truth on that. Or it means that he had a setback sometime this week, in practice, which is also possible. That it hurts Missouri. Certainly, Cook is an experienced lineman. I don't know that it kills them. I guess Connor Wood will be the guy that gets more of the snaps. Now, will they put – I would assume that they will put Connor Wood just at guard in place of Cook, and they'll keep Javon Foster and Hiron White out at the tackle. So Connor Wood probably is playing left guard or right guard, and Xavier Delgado plays the other one. But that is certainly interesting. I also had someone tell me that Connor Tollison was actually at the homecoming game in Jackson last night, so it looks like maybe he didn't make the trip. I don't know whether that's injury or that's simply he wasn't going to be in a position to play because you have a limited number of guys you can take on the road. Far fewer guys suit up for road games. I figure it's like 55 or something like that. And now somebody saying that Case Cook is there. So I don't really know, to be honest, if Case Cook is there or not. Mitch is saying it looks as if he didn't make the trip. Somebody on the chat is saying he is there. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll ask Mitch. We're going to have him call in here in about 5 minutes, and we will get some answers on that. I feel like we've kind of hit on the things that are going to, be big factors in this game. It really, it's not breaking news, right, to say that games tend to come down to the line of scrimmage. I think that's always kind of the case. But specifically, BC's offensive line, Missouri's defensive front, I think is big. And then can Missouri cover Boston College's receivers one-on-one, which then allows them to devote a little bit more energy to the run game where they have been dreadful. We're going to take one more look at some of the numbers here for BC and Mizzou. Mizzou, more plays, more yards against better competition. BC running the ball better. Missouri throwing the ball significantly better. Passing yardage, 123 yards a game difference. Missouri has done a better job hanging on to the football. So defense is what I'm interested in here. So Boston College has the number 13 overall defense in the country. They're allowing 254 yards a game. Again, this is Colgate, UMass, and Temple. They should rank that high. There's no other way to get around it. This is not Wisconsin. This is not Georgia. This is not Clemson or A&M on defense. But it's been a good defense so far. They have done what they should have done against the 3 teams they've played. But, again, BC number 13 in total defense, and I am scrolling down to find Missouri number 115. BC has given up 254 yards a game, and Missouri giving up 456 yards a game. So I don't think you have to be a genius to figure that out. That is 202 yards per game difference. Rushing defense, as we have said over and over and over, Missouri, the worst Power 5 run defense in the country at 127. They are better than Western Kentucky, Rice, and Illinois. Boston College against the run has been, let me see if I can even find them here. They're 33rd in the country, 101 yards a game. They're allowing 3.01 yards a carry and have allowed one rushing touchdown. Missouri is allowing 6.37 yards per carry and has allowed 9 rushing touchdowns. Guys, those are just historically awful numbers. If those continue, I don't see how Missouri, if those numbers continue to be even close, I don't see how Missouri makes a bowl game, to be quite honest with you, much less, anything better than that. Pass defense, BC is 18th in the country, giving up 153 yards a game. They've got 4 interceptions versus allowing three touchdown passes, giving up 6.4 yards an attempt, which is that's fairly average. Missouri's actually been fine against the pass, 186.3 yards a game, 4 interceptions, 3 touchdowns, 7 yards per attempt. So the pass defenses are relatively equal. The huge difference here has been in the run defenses, and I mean that's not a surprise, right? That's if you've watched Missouri play, you understand the run defense has not been very good. So that's where BC's run game and just how much attention Missouri has to devote to that is really going to be the major thing. I don't know, when Missouri has the ball, I'm not sure, that we're looking at one specific thing. They've been pretty balanced. So when you're playing defense against Missouri, I don't know if there's one thing that you say, we got to stop this, other than, Tyler Beatty. He has been virtually the entire offense, whether that is running the ball or throwing the ball. If you're looking at this from Eli Drinkwitz's perspective, what you'd like to see is someone other than Tyler Beatty step up, especially in the passing game. Whether it's, and I think it's more likely it's a wide receiver than a tight end, because I'm not sold Missouri has difference-making tight ends, but you'd like to see somebody step up on the outside, whether it's Dove or Chisholm, whether it's Lovett or Cooper. The guy that always impresses me is Chance Looper, whether it's Boo Smith, somebody on the outside. You'd like to step up and take some of those catches away from Tyler Beatty in this game. And now we're going out to Boston. Mitchell Forty on the phone from Alumni Stadium. What's up, Mitch? How's things, man?
It's going pretty good. Eating some clam chowder in the press box. Can't complain about that.
Excellent. I would say that I normally wouldn't eat seafood in a press box, but if you're going to do it, probably Boston is a pretty safe place to do it.
Yeah, no, it's good. Actually, it's good. I'm pleased. And,
good.
Worst case scenario, I just have to miss the game with the food poisoning. It's not that bad.
Right. I'm happy. So, real quick, first things first, you had tweeted that you weren't sure Case Cook was there. Somebody said on our chat that he is there. I don't know if that's somebody at the game. Have you gotten any clarity on that?
I've not gotten a confirmation that he's out, but I'm virtually certain he is not there. I've looked, pretty hard for him, and I've not spotted him. So if he's here, he's not in uniform, at least I would say that. Everyone's out there dressed on the field, so It does not look like to me that he's going to be playing today.
So that would lead, like I said, to one of two solutions. Either is probably equally likely. Either Cook had some sort of a setback in practice this week, or Eli Drinkwitz just lied when he said he could have played last week. And those are both equally likely.
I think the latter may be even more likely, but based on the fact that on Tuesday he wasn't into the practicing fully. He was doing stuff off to the side, so I don't know. Maybe he wasn't or he was a little less healthy than Eli Drinkwitz let on last week. But either way, he's not out there.
Are we anybody else notable that you don't see? Somebody told me that Connor Tollison was at the homecoming game in Jackson, so he may not be on the trip. But I don't think Connor Tollison is a guy that's going to play a lot.
I was just kind of right. Yeah, I was just kind of going down the the depth chart, and I've seen everyone except Cook and obviously Darius Robinson, who we knew was going to be out this week.
Right.
So I did not notice Connor Tollison's not there. I'll look for that in a minute and post on the board if for some reason I don't see him. But I think from what I can tell, most of the other contributors are here.
Yeah, so we've been talking. I guess Drinkwitz had said in an interview, I think it was on the pregame radio show, that they've got to look at committing more guys to the run, putting more guys in the box, and which is then going to put the corners kind of one-on-one. So I think really it comes down to, are Missouri's defenders, defensive backs, capable of covering Zay Flowers and these BC receivers fairly well one-on-one? And also just kind of hidden in there is, can Missouri stop the run even if they are putting 7 and 8 guys in the box?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, they were putting. I mean, you broke down the numbers. They've been putting 7 guys in the box a fair amount, and against Kentucky at least, it did not seem to help. So, yeah, I think obviously priority number one is stop the run, make Boston College have to throw, and then you take your chances from there. I think the goal would probably be, you can let, Dennis Grosel try to hit, 5, 10, 15 even yard passes, but just try not to let Zay Flowers get over the top for a huge play. And if you can stop the run and try, and Dennis Grosel beats you by completing a bunch of passes and moving the ball down the field, you probably live with that.
Right, you just tip your cap at that point. I think I was texting with a guy I know who does some NFL draft stuff last night. He said BC has 3 potential offensive linemen that could play in the league. I mean, it's simple, but this kind of comes down to, can Missouri's defensive front stand up against them at all? If they can't, if BC's just handing the ball off for 4, 5, 6 yards a pop, this could be kind of a repeat of what we saw in Lexington.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually 17 NFL scouts here, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. That's a lot for this game. I guess there's not, a ton of other big games going on this weekend, but still, that seemed like a big number to me. So obviously some NFL talent on the field. And, yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about, you mentioned putting more guys in the box and what schematic changes could be made. But like we said after Kentucky, if you don't have a defensive line that can line up and get off blocks and fill gaps, I mean, there's just not too much you can do about that. So some guys have to win one-on-one battles. And I actually think it's not like Mizzou has to stuff the run every single play. I just think you need occasionally a guy to make a play for maybe a tackle for loss or something like that, put Boston College behind the chains to where they can't, run the ball, and then you have a chance to get off the field. So, I'm not expecting them to hold Boston College to 56 yards rushing like they did SEMO in the first half, but if you can just make enough plays, force Dennis Grosel to make a play through the air, get him behind the chains, I think Mizzou has a decent chance.
All right, so when Missouri has the ball, look, they've been pretty balanced. I mean, run and pass, I don't think there's any one thing that a defense comes in saying we got to stop this other than Tyler Beatty. I think this has to be the week that Eli Drinkwitz finds somebody else who's consistent on offense. I don't care if it's Elijah Young, Michael Cox, Dominic Lovett, Kiki. It doesn't matter who it is. It just has to be somebody.
Yeah, I agree. You have to imagine Boston College is going to make its number one focus, containing Tyler Beatty, not letting him, turn those little swing passes and screen passes into big gains like he was able to do against Kentucky. And obviously part of that is, he might be able to still do it even if they game plan against it, making guys miss and whatnot. But I agree. I think you're going to need to find, someone probably in the receiver ranks who's, able to be consistent, who Connor Bazelak is able to go to whenever he needs to play. Who that is, we really don't know yet. I mean, Kiki Chisholm's been probably his top, target from in the receiving corps from a target standpoint so far this season. But yeah, I just think someone needs to be that guy, or some combination of guys need to step up and fill that role.
All right, finish up with a couple just kind of quick scene setters. I know at one point it was maybe going to rain, looks less like it. I mean, what are the conditions like? Do you think it has any effect on the game today?
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful day. It's probably mid-60s right now. A little bit overcast, but not rainy. A little bit of a breeze. It's actually a perfect football day.
Great. And then what's the crowd like, and what have you seen as far as Mizzou fans? I mean, it sounds like there are a lot of people that were making this their one road trip they were taking. So I would think, I mean, if BC has 40,000, I think 10% of that might be Mizzou fans.
Yeah, I agree. I don't obviously have a frame of reference for what a normal, tailgating crowd looks like here, but there were certainly a ton of people out and about around the stadium. And I saw a lot of black and gold for sure. A lot of Mizzou fans, I think made the trek. So I would agree. I would not be surprised at all if it's a full stadium, if there's 3, 4, 5,000 Mizzou fans here.
All right. Well, hey, enjoy the chowder. Enjoy the game. Maybe in that order. But thanks for checking in, man.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. See you, Mitchell Forty from Alumni Stadium in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. We always try to kind of get the feel from the stadium there, and like I said, it's looking like a pretty big crowd, pretty good Missouri turnout. Weather 0 factor, so hey, there you go. There's the scene, and it sounds like Missouri is going to be without Case Cook in this game. sounds like maybe Connor Tollison as well, but that is less of a factor, to be quite honest with you, because Tollison was going to play, but he wasn't going to play a ton. Spencer says they bring Martez Manuel and Sean Robinson up consistently. It's going to take 8 or 9 guys, which just means the safeties are about to be really tested. I don't think there's a defense that can afford to put 9 guys in the box. 8 is unusual, but does happen. What determines what an offense wants to do is usually 6 or 7 in the box. The general rule, and RPO, run pass option, is becoming more and more of a thing. And what that is for a lot of you guys watching this know. And look, I'm not trying to teach remedial football 101 here, but some people don't know this. So when the quarterback takes the snap on an RPO, basically the determination has not been made whether they're running or throwing the football. A lot of times, if there are 6 or fewer in the box, that means you should run the football. If there's 7 or more, that means you should throw the football. It doesn't always just go along those lines, but that's kind of the determination. If you can't stop the run with 7 guys in the box, you're in trouble, because then that means you're bringing 8 up. You've got 3 guys in coverage. You're probably man-to-man with the tight end or a running back, which is obviously a tough situation for a lot of linebackers and safeties. So if you got to have more than 7 to stop the run, you are in big, big trouble. Gary says they need to minimize the damage against the run, or it could be a long day. Yeah, it's not rocket science, guys. We know the keys here. Jacob Israel says soft tackling isn't going to get it done, and I thought, that was, to me, the most concerning part of what happened against Kentucky. I don't really know against SEMO because I didn't break down the 185 fourth quarter rushing yards. I'm not super concerned about what happened against SEMO because the bulk of those yards came against guys that aren't going to be on the field today. But against Kentucky, what I was concerned about was I didn't see a ton of terrible tackling. They missed 9 tackles in that game, I think. The problem was that they just weren't there. They were just getting blown out of the way. It wasn't that they were missing tackles. It's that they weren't there to make tackles to begin with. And so I think obviously that's a pretty big concern for Missouri going into this game. Do they make BC's passing game beat them? I think you have to, right? Again, kind of like Mitch was saying, if Dennis Grosel throws for 250 yards, then hey, you just tip your cap. You can't stop everything on defense. So you've got to stop the thing that's most likely to hurt you. And what's most likely to hurt you, if you're Missouri, is the run game. So you've got to do everything you can to stop that. And if the guy throws for 280 yards and 3 touchdowns, then you just tip your cap and say, okay, hey, you beat us. That's the way it goes. So that's the situation. We've talked with Mitch, talked with Andy Backstrom. Want to run through just a couple. We'll wrap things up for you here real quick. We'll take one more look at the SEC. Georgia and Vandy also starting here in about 20 minutes, along with Mizzou, BC, LSU, Mississippi State the same time. The afternoon slate has one good game in A&M, Arkansas, one game that you shouldn't pay any attention to in Georgia State, Auburn. Then tonight, Tennessee, Florida, Kentucky, South Carolina, and Southern Miss, Alabama. So things pretty spread out. 8 games over the 3 time windows. A&M, Arkansas is a good game. Kentucky, South Carolina could be. Mizzou, BC, interesting. LSU, Mississippi State, interesting. The rest of the games, not so interesting. But, hey, they still have to play them. So there's the rest of the information for the SEC stuff. I just realized that I have been saying all along that Mizzou, BC is an 11 p.m. kickoff. That is not the case. It is an 11 a.m. kickoff on ESPN2. You can listen to Mike Kelly and Howard Richards on the Tiger Radio Network. First meeting between the teams ever. Second meeting will be, I think it's next year in Columbia, but sometime soon in Columbia, the return game in this series. This one is... This one's kind of the season maker, guys. If Missouri wins this game, they come back for Tennessee 3-1. You've got some confidence Missouri will be favored in that game. You can see 5-1 headed into A&M. And if you're 5-1, then 7 wins, maybe even 8 wins looks doable. If you lose this game, 8 wins is, I think, pretty much off the table. And 7 wins is tougher. So this is a huge swing game, not just for the overall record, but also for how are fans going to feel. What's the momentum going to look like? Because the fear is if they lose this game, the casual fans check out at 2-2, which wouldn't be the right move, wouldn't be fair, but I think it is certainly possible. So if you're coming back for Tennessee at 2-2 and all of a sudden you got 44,000 in the stands, then things start to worry you a little bit. So this is we said before the season, Kentucky and BC were kind of the swing of the season, and to me they were always a set. I never thought Missouri would win both, but I think they'll be good enough to not lose both. So going 1-1 those games in those two was always the key for me. Now, obviously, you would have loved to win the first one because you'd almost be playing today with house money. That's not the case. They lost at Kentucky. This is now a game. I don't want to say Missouri has to win this game because I don't think that's the case. But I think if Missouri wants to have a season that approaches what you guys all wanted it to be a month ago, then it does have to win this game. Because if you lose this game, 8-4 is off the table to me. 8-4 does not happen if you lose this game. So that's where we're at. We're going to break it all down again on the post-game show. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time or maybe who have kind of forgotten or just, hey, you just need a reminder every Saturday morning. So within minutes, when the game ends, I'm going to kind of total up some numbers, just get a little formatting done, and within 5 to 10 minutes of the end of the game, I will be live on the Boulevard Brewing Company post-game drink. So the way you know that, yes, you can just sit on YouTube starting at 2:15 or whatever if you want to, and that's great. But subscribe to the YouTube channel, and that will allow you to get an alert. So whether you're on your phone, your computer, whatever, when we go live after the game, you'll get a heads up. Hey, PowerMizzou.com is live. You can jump in. We'll take your calls. We'll talk all about it. It should be somewhere around 2:30, but, these games, sometimes they take 4.5 hours. Who knows what's going to happen? So while you're here, subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button. That helps the visibility. It helps more people watch. It helps us be able to do more things. And speaking of helping us, Colin Gentry Law Group has helped us by presenting this show all season long. Kind of crazy. We're already a third of the way through the football season after today. But Colin Gentry Law Group at callgentry.com. You can also give them a phone call. They won't be there today because it's Saturday. They're all probably watching Mizzou BC. But you can get a hold of them by phone, 573-691-4571. If you go to callgentry.com, you can schedule a consultation. You can do an online chat. Family law, criminal law, business law, contract law, personal injury and wrongful death. Chip, Jason, Emily, Nick, everybody down there are going to take care of you guys. So, again, as we always ask, just give them the first shot. If you need something, give them a call. So we're going to finish things out here with just like a few of your guys' comments going through here as we get to kickoff. Gary says, I think a blowout, just not sure who yet. That's where I'm at. Nothing surprises me in this game. Jacob Israel says, no excuses. Mizzou needs to win. So, yeah, that's where we're at, guys. It's all over but the actual game. About 17 minutes to kick off. Appreciate you guys being here. And, hey, let's finish it out with, hey, we found a BC fan who found the show. So welcome to you. I'm sure nobody will be wishing you good luck, but appreciate you checking us out. And Jacob Israel with phenomenal analysis to close us out. Winning is the key. Just remember that, guys. The key, winning. Winning is better than losing. We'll see what Missouri does. We'll see you back here on the post-game drink after Mizzou and BC, 17 minutes away on ESPN2. Thanks for watching, guys.